talk to you guys today, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. As Amy mentioned, I'm on City of Ottawa Council. It's a beautiful, sunny, snowy day here, and nothing else is going on here in Ottawa. I'm sure you're all aware that nothing is happening in Ottawa. It's just peaceful as can be. So in my time on council, so I've served as I'm currently serving as the chair of what we call the Environment Committee. I chair the Planning Committee, and I'm also involved with other different things that help inform how I do the job and how we're able to provide influence on certain things. The last speaker speaking about primary agricultural land, I was chairing the working group that when we updated our LEAR, so our land evaluation area review. The City of Ottawa is about 2,800 square kilometers, and more than 80% of it is rural. So we have quite a bit of agricultural lands. And when we updated the LEAR, it was to inform our official plan and make sure that we were protecting as much agricultural land as possible. In fact, ideally, all of it. We actually put a motion forward to ensure that we were doing that. So I'm involved with that. I sit on the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, and I chair a couple of sponsors groups as well. So we have these council sponsors groups. There's about 24 of us on council, and we have these sponsor groups that we put together. One of them is on climate change. One of them is on solid waste, because we're developing a solid waste master plan through our committee as well. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I want to talk about some of those things today and how it all feeds together, and how the City of Ottawa is looking to how we manage climate change through our master plan, and how that feeds into our growth planning as well, and then what we're doing to implement our climate change goals. So back in 2015, council directed staff to develop a renewable energy strategy, and that later became something known as energy evolution, which I'll touch on in a bit. And staff did a lot of work on that over the next 2, 3 to 4 years. In 2019, with a new council, we declared a climate emergency. And it's important, the climate emergency, that's been going around a bit, but I'm not a huge fan of motions that don't have substance. So when this came forward to council, I wanted to make sure it meant something, and that it wasn't just a token gesture that we see sometimes in politics, that we make these statements, but they don't actually mean anything. So the motion that came before council, that council ultimately approved, actually had a lot of directions in it to make sure that we were acting on the emergency. So we were actually doing stuff. And one of them happened to be that sponsors group. So getting councillors together from various committees, including the Environment Committee, the Planning Committee, Transportation Committee, Transit Commission, the Board of Health, making sure that those committees were reflected in our sponsors group, so we could focus, council could focus and work with staff on developing policies related to environmental protection. We directed staff to update what was known as the Air Quality and Climate Change Management Plan. We've now succinctly just referred to that as the Climate Change Master Plan, because several years ago we set a target for a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 80% below 2012 levels. The problem is, when we did that, when we made that declaration back in 2016 or so, we didn't actually have any teeth to it. We didn't have any substance. We said we wanted to get to a target, but we didn't actually provide the mechanism to get there. So the climate emergency motion made sure that we were actually going to do that. And we wanted to see more implementation of energy evolution, which was that renewable energy strategy. And we wanted the city to develop a climate resiliency strategy, which is still ongoing. So we won't touch on that too much, but that is still something that is expected to come to council this year, 2022, hopefully before the next election. So we'll start a bit with that climate change master plan. And when we were working on the sponsors group, before we brought the master plan to council, we made the commitment to go beyond the 80% and to 100%. It was clear that if we're going to do something, we better go the whole way, and we better make sure we have the ability to get there. And so we created the climate change master plan. It came to council back in January of 2020. Not much has changed since then, obviously. And in January 2020, we managed to get unanimous support, which on a council of 24, with a wide array of different views and councillors with different backgrounds and representing different areas. I'm a rural councillor. I represent a rural area of about 744 square kilometers. It's quite a significantly large area, 30,000 residents, but we also have very large, very small, dense wards, downtown wards, suburban wards. So we have a big mix of council members, and to get them all on the same page with our climate change master plan was pretty important. But it was about all in the messaging of what the master plan was and what it can mean. And we did that through some of the following principles, which responsibility was one. So everyone has a responsibility to manage energy consumption and mitigate risks. Collaboration. So we worked with partners in various sectors. So we had endorsements of our climate change master plan from Hydro One, from Hydro Ottawa, from Enbridge, other utility providers. We worked with community stakeholders, and we need to work with the other levels of government too. So working with our provincial partners, federal partners, because there's no way any municipality can manage climate change and can address the issues alone. We know that, and that's all built into our plan to work with other levels. Ultimately, I believe that upper levels of government should actually be working with us and helping us fund our plans. If municipalities can be the leader on implementing climate change plans and making change, the biggest challenge we have is the financial part of it. So to have our partners actually help us and fund some of these plans, we can certainly go a long way. Municipal leadership is another huge piece of this. It's a key principle. So we need to make sure that our municipal leaders are, myself, other councillors, mayor, are engaged on this and are committed to it. Because it's very easy through elections for this stuff to change. We need to make sure it stays on the forefront. And that's why we've tried to embed this stuff in our other plans. So this is the climate change master plan. I'm going to talk about the official plan, but we also have transportation master plan. We also have an infrastructure master plan, the solid waste master plan. And what we try to do is embed the climate change master plan policies in all of those plans. So it's not just one area. We don't just have one committee that deals with climate. It's all committees that deal with climate. And it's important to make that reality so that when you're at Transit Commission, you're thinking about these things. It's not just, well, that's over at the Environment Committee. It belongs everywhere. And so that came to Council in January 2020, as I mentioned. It identified 8 priority actions over the next 5 years. One of them is implement energy evolution, which again, I'll get to. Another key element is a climate lens. I talked about the importance of talking about this at other committees and all city decisions. So add a climate lens to our official plan, add a climate lens to asset management capital projects. So ensuring that when we make decisions as a council, we're doing it with the full perspective of what these decisions mean. And that community engagement piece, the encouraging community action through education, incentives, support, and advocacy for senior levels of government. So that falls upon all of us to make sure that we're doing that. We're speaking with our colleagues at the provincial and federal levels, which most of us do have a close relationship with those individuals. We have about 9 MPs and MPPs that cover the grounds of the City of Ottawa because it's so large. So we do try to keep that relationship good. It's tough through moments like this in Ottawa, but we're working through it. So on that energy evolution piece. So the energy evolution is really our implementation plan for climate change action plan, for the climate change master plan. It is the action plan of it. And it's the tool that's going to get us where we need to be. And it lays out how we get there. It actually costs it too. So it shows us exactly what we need to do in what timeline in order to achieve our goals. And the reduction targets, as I mentioned, they're 100%. So from a community perspective, that's 100% by 2050. From a corporate perspective, so all the things the municipality has control over, it's 100% by 2040. And we're well on our way in both areas. Our short-term goal is 2025 is 30% on the corporate side and 43% on the community side. And we're doing well to get there, but still it's going to take a bit more, and we have to, it's not something that we can do alone. The short-term projects, so we had 20 community and municipal projects that we identified to accelerate action and investment over the next 5 years. And some of those are already in place. So we don't, unfortunately this council, we haven't invested enough money in this, but the money that we do invest, our staff at the city are phenomenal in leveraging those funds and ensuring that we get the most out of that. And one of those was working with the Federation of Community Municipalities to fund the Better Homes Loan Program. So it's an incentive program for 4 retrofits, 2 homes. We've just started this, working with the community partner as well to see that move forward. Electric buses, that's something that we're moving into too. We know that that's a challenge. It's certainly a lot of concern for residents in Ottawa is, can this work in Ottawa with our climate? We're piloting buses this winter. We do have a commitment from the federal government to help fund more electric buses to electrify our entire bus fleet, increasing waste diversion. I mentioned the solid waste master plan. We're planning what we do for the next 30 years on solid waste. We own a landfill. We'd rather not own a second landfill. So we want to make sure that what we're doing there works through our green bin program, which is something that we've tried to accelerate in recent years. We want to go further on that. So that's a key piece of everything that we do. So this, again, that example of how much this crosses all different departments. And we're currently in the midst of bringing forward high performance development standards for new buildings in the City of Ottawa. That's actually going to be coming to our planning committee later this winter. Actually, I think it's going to be in April that we're going to see that, maybe so early spring. So these are all things that we're trying to work on to action our climate change master plan and put energy evolution into play. We know the 5 actions with the most significant impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions are electrifying personal vehicles. That's one that obviously we can't do alone. That's one we know the market is shifting and it needs to be there with us in order to achieve those goals. Retrofitting existing residential buildings, diverting organic waste from landfill and creating renewable natural gas, retrofitting existing commercial buildings and transitioning to zero emission commercial fleets. So we have a green fleet program at the city where when opportunities arise, we look to see what we can do to green our fleet. So collectively, those 5 actions alone will help us account for roughly 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions required. But again, you can't do it alone. So moving from that, that's more the bigger picture stuff. But I want to talk more about our official plan. And it started with our growth management strategy. So how are we growing? And I saw someone mention population growth earlier. I'm part of the problem. I have 5 kids, so I'm not doing much when it comes to managing my own population growth. But when we look at the city and our new official plan, we'll look out to 2046 as to where we're going and how we're going to get there. And we're projected to grow to 1.4 million people by 2046. That's over 400,000 more people. And that means we're going to need 195,000 new homes between now and then. So the focus of our growth management plan is balance. We want to balance intensification with growth of the urban boundary. Ideally, we don't want to grow the urban boundary. We'd like to keep it the way it is. But we know that we can't accommodate all that growth in the next 25 years without growing the boundary. But we're looking to fast track our intensification to make sure that we're implementing as much as possible that we can accept, which politically is not that easy. But it's important that we continue to look at that growth and find a way to balance that. Encouraging denser, walkable 15-minute communities, making sure that our growth is happening around transit. There won't be much in the rural area. We're expecting about 7% of our growth to happen in the rural area, most of that within defined villages on public services. And the implementation part of this is through the official plan, through the zoning bylaw, which is coming. I mentioned the 15-minute community is going to be a big part of that, making sure that we're creating well-connected communities, clustering of diverse mix of land uses, range of housing types, shops, services, jobs, daycare facilities, all those things within an easy area to get to so that you're reducing the need for transportation across the city. So I see Amy's on here. I'm probably getting close to time. I know I could probably talk a lot more. Just to talk a bit, so we have in our official plan, we've built in climate change mitigation policies. We've built in climate change adaptation policies. I'd be happy to share anything if anyone wants to reach out to talk about what we do at the city. For us, it doesn't end here. We have a long way to go. The next term of council is coming up at the end of this year. We still have to fund the balance of energy evolution, which will be an ongoing piece. We have to implement the official plan through a new zoning bylaw. That new zoning bylaw is going to give us the ability to get to the intensification targets we need to get to without making it so difficult of going to an official plan amendment constantly, which is what we do now. And the pushback to intensification we know is significant. We have an entire ring of our city that we refer to as the bungalow belt. They do not want to intensify, but that is where the growth needs to occur. We need to start to reducing the sort of single dwelling developments and look for more high density development. But it's easier said than done. And I'm sure many of you in municipalities understand that how do you balance that growth? We don't want to grow into the agricultural area. We want to maximize the land that we have, but we also can't expect built up communities to take the brunt of the growth. So it's an ongoing challenge, but it's one that we're focused on addressing and using that climate change master plan to help us move forward so that we aren't just growing needlessly without thinking of the future. We're growing in a way that embeds climate policy so that we aren't actually making the situation worse as we grow.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. We do have some questions in the chat. I'm wondering if you could just, while we are moving on in the conference, if you could just answer some questions in the chat there.
For sure, I'd be happy to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.